Hello there, this is part 2 of the Intrinsically Safe apparatus, radio equipment as well as electrical apparatus video, part 2. Thank you for joining me. Just to reiterate what we went through in part 1, we looked at where or what applications this type of equipment may be used in. We looked at the coding, which is the intrinsically safe legends and symbology and what they mean regarding gas codes, temperature and zones in which this type of equipment could be used in. And we also looked at unapproved radios, such as these two radios are not intrinsically safe. They don't carry the logos like the yellow instrument does there. There's nothing on the back of the radio to suggest that. So to use equipment like this in a hazardous zone, and likewise this doesn't carry the IS labelling either, so to use this kit in a hazardous zone could cause an explosion, a gas, chemical, dust environment, chemical vapours. It's quite easy. We looked at the different types of accessories and things that can go with these radios. Unless they're intrinsically safe approved, i.e. they carry the same labelling as the radio does, like this instrument here. If I had an accessory that connected in to either the back or front of the unit, it must also carry the same symbology of intrinsic safety and certification requirements that the device does, and for the right environment that it's used in. And what you'll often find, and this is where serious mistakes take place, somebody will take in a non-hazardous radio, like this for example, which is not intrinsically safe, and they'll take that into a hazardous environment, in which case that's fatal, and has often been the case where it's resulted in serious explosion, killing everybody concerned. Indeed, even if we were to consider this radio, for example, to be intrinsically safe, and we were to take this into a hazardous environment, and say for example it had the intrinsically safe label and coding here and it all looked fine, if you were to connect a microphone into the top which doesn't carry the same labelling as a radio, it would compromise intrinsic safety, and thus any certification that's been given to the radio will be null and void. And likewise, attaching asset labels, alloy asset labels, that can strike a spark, as we went through in part 1. This exactly here wouldn't be an approved accessory, simply because you can strike a spark. Again, carry holsters, leather carry holsters that hug the radio will have press studs on them to lock in the radio, and the press studs themselves can strike a spark. So only accessories to be used with the radio that are intrinsically safe, approved and certified as such, they're the only things that can be used with a radio in a hazardous environment. Batteries the same again. It's worth noting on Motorola sets like the P210, the HT800 models that are intrinsically safe with the correct labelling on, they have a little green or a blue spot here that's got to marry up with a blue spot on the radio battery, and the radio battery will have engraved on it the intrinsically safe certification, a bit like what we see here on the yellow instrument, but it'll be on the battery. And if the two dots don't line with the same colour, then the battery's not intrinsically safe. So that's worth noting on Motorola radios. But yes, you wouldn't take anything like that into a mine or an intrinsically safe environment, be it petrochemical offshore oil rigs, gas drilling or oil drilling. You wouldn't take this into any form of hazardous environment. That's a non-hazardous radio, and likewise this is too. So it must carry the correct labelling on all the accessories, on the radio device itself, and on anything that connects to the radio. Naturally, you could have a situation where you have a radio that's intrinsically safe certified, an accessory such as a microphone and a battery that's IS certified, and then you'll always get some idiot, some clown, who'll take the mains battery charger that isn't intrinsically safe approved into the mine as well to try and charge it up. or into a hazardous environment, in which case that immediately compromises the safety of everybody in that hazardous zone. Indeed, it has been the case in the past, particularly in developing countries, where they've been mining and caused serious explosions through even fixed line telephones being used within the mine, which uses a bell and a striker which has a spark gap, and it uses that to vibrate the bell striker with an electromagnet. And there's been cases where a phone call's been placed to the phone in the mine, and it's caused an immediate explosion because the bell ringer causes a physical spark. And there's been plenty of cases of things like that happening and taking unapproved electrical equipment into hazardous areas and then causing a massive explosion. So intrinsic safety is incredibly important for human safety, as well as mining operations and chemical operations, and you must never ever substitute any part of a radio device or an electrical instrument or even cabling or anything that's not intrinsically safe approved in a hazardous environment. It's not worth the risks. You compromise your own safety and everybody else's safety around you. It's very important as well that equipment that's certified for use in a particular environment is the only type of equipment that's used in there. The levels of protection, often with mines radios for example, and things that are encapsulated to prevent a source of ignition and gas sealed, etc. The better the level of protection, the more safety it gives. Obviously there are instruments like this that have a very basic level of protection, whereas used in other environments, where if you look at the gas codes that I put in the link in the description, you can obviously operate this in an environment theoretically that will be, again, contravene its safety, simply because some of the dust and gas and vapour atmospheres are not even approved for this instrument to work in. So you've got to know what your environments you're going to be working in allow. You mustn't compromise intrinsic safety. In doing so, you put yourself at risk and everybody who works with you at risk. It's extremely dangerous. Human life critical decisions are paramount when dealing with this type of equipment. Indeed, I remember recalling a conversation at an exporter once, about 15 years ago. I went to an exporter in Leeds who I bought a piece of equipment from, and whilst there I was introduced to a member of the Congo government that had turned up, and they were buying ex-mining drilling equipment for their, I believe, diamond mines and other mines that they've got in Congo and South Africa and places like that. And this chap knew nothing about intrinsic safety, didn't know anything about radio equipment and electrical test instruments that needed to be intrinsically safe. And I must have spent a good half hour explaining to him about the importance of intrinsically safe. I gave him an outline sort of description of how it's to be used. So it just shows you how little knowledge there is out there in some countries as to the importance of using intrinsically safe equipment. And whilst I informed him of what needed to be done, whether he actually took that on board and then put that into practice, I don't know. But when you hear around the world some of the incidents that go on and the terrible deaths that are caused through using unapproved equipment that lead to gas explosions, and then many people die, obviously it's very important. Now, in many developed countries, such as in the UK, the United States and other countries around the world that are developed nations, obviously when an accident occurs, an explosion, or there's some fatalities involved, then there's a big investigation with health and safety experts that go in and investigate and find out what the cause was. And again, this comes down to having equipment certified, the people that work on them certified to work on them, that all the procedures and practices around maintenance are all adhered to, and that regular inspections are taking place of the equipment, and that nothing that is dangerous can be used in those hazardous environments. And that is paramount, absolutely paramount in all cases. Sadly, it is the case that in some developing nations that's still not happening. But I think again, through education, through information, and through sharing experiences of disasters and the circumstances surrounding some of these incidents, then hopefully that can be avoided, even in parts of the world where this is not normally a primary concern. So with that, please bear in mind that when using intrinsically safe equipment, that you make sure that there are no unapproved accessories connected to the radio or the piece of electrical equipment you're using, and that you make sure that it's certified, that it has an intrinsically safe certificate if it's been maintained, that the repairer has certified it to be safe, and that you're familiar with the environment that the equipment's to be used in. And if you follow basic safety guidelines, and that you don't use equipment inappropriately or fetch non-intrinsically safe items into a hazardous area, then you should be fine if you abide by basic principles and practices of safety. Incredibly important. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch up with you next one.